Okay, welcome back. This segment we're going to talk about remediation. And there is a very specific way to do remediation right. Again, this knowledge will help you to guide and protect your clients so they know what to expect from a remediator and how to identify a shyster, because there are a billion shysters out there. People with promises, but they don't really have anything to deliver, and they know they don't have to deliver anything because you and I can't see the mold. That's part of what this training is all about. So the remediation is about a 5-step process. The first one is to eliminate the root cause. Step 2 is going to be drying the area out. And step 3, we've got the negative air. Then we've got gross removal. We're going to talk about more of these in more detail. The HEPA treatment, then we're going to seal with primer, and we're going to talk about that. And finally, we've got restoration. So that's 6 steps, but only 5 of them are actually related to the remediation of the mold. So going back to the first one, eliminating the root cause, maybe that's a roof leak, maybe it's a plumbing leak, maybe in one case it was because somebody actually installed wet insulation in the walls, and while that wet insulation was up, they put the sheetrock up behind it, and that wet insulation was just trapped there for who knows how long until it finally evaporated. And that might have been a year, who knows, I don't have that number. But during that time, that dampness caused the inside of the sheetrock to mold up like nobody's business. It was black with mold. The guy called me. I did this inspection for this guy, and he called me, I don't know, I'm going to say 6 months later, and he says, "You're going to want to see this." He had actually gone in and he was completely remodeling his family room to the point, and it was an addition, to the point that he was actually removing sheetrock as well. And he had removed some of it, saw this black, nasty mold history on the backside. And as a result, he ended up removing the sheetrock all the way around that addition, and every inch of it was damaged, heavily damaged by the mold. The next question, of course, is why? What water source is all the way around this room? Obviously, it wouldn't have been, maybe a roof leak, because that would have been a spot. The whole room was moldy like that. That it was part of the installation or something that's going to be very consistent across the room. In that case, eliminating the root cause had already happened because this wet insulation over years had dried out, and then the mold that had a very healthy time for whatever period of time, it eventually died off when things dried out. Step 2 is to actually dry, if you're remediating, step 2 is to actually dry the area out. You can do this with a dehydrator, and these are similar to the stuff that you can buy at places like Walmart or Home Depot, but they're much bigger, much more effective. And what these are going to do is they're actually going to pull humidity from the air, condense that, and then pump it out. They'll drain to maybe a toilet or a shower or somewhere outside of the house where that water can drain away successfully and safely. So as they are pulling this water from the air now is drying out, and it's saying, "Hey, I'm dry, I need replacement air." And that's going to pull water from the carpet, from the walls, anywhere that it can get replacement humidity. And in this way, you can very consistently and reliably and evenly dry a room out. You'd think that would be a very difficult way to do it, but this is the way the professionals actually get it done. They'll bring in those dehydrators, and those things are big. They're about 3 or 4 feet tall, and yes, you can rent them at places like Home Depot, some of them, not all of them, but they are very effective. Sometimes you got to leave them in depending on how much water there is in the damaged area. Sometimes you can get rid of that in a day, sometimes it'll take longer than that. But that is step 2, is actually drying the air out. Next thing you're going to do, if you're monitoring the remediator, he is going to create a negative air situation. This may involve tarps to isolate the affected room. But one thing about mold is that, it's a living organism and it wants to survive. And if it is stressed, what it's going to do is kick a whole bunch of baby spores, if you will, into the air with the intent that those spores will go somewhere else and live. And you don't want any of them to live. You want it all to die. So the last thing you want is to be treating a mold colony on this wall and get a whole bunch of mold spores into the air, which then find their way into the rest of the house while you're trying to eliminate a problem. You know, the irony there of causing a problem by trying to eliminate one, you know, no remediator wants to be that guy. So what he's going to do is he's going to isolate the room in whatever way works best, and then he's going to create a negative air situation. Basically what happens there is he's going to use a HEPA vacuum, and he's going to put the suction end of the HEPA system inside the project, inside the room where we're working. And what that's going to do is it's going to pull air from that room, and it's going to create a suction, a vacuum, so that instead of having air potentially leave the room from underneath the doorways or whatever, it's any airflow is going to be into this room, and this keeps any contamination isolated within that room where it can be killed. So that's what negative air does, and you're going to be, you will, if you notice, and if the guy is doing it right, he will have a HEPA vacuum, which means a vacuum with a HEPA filter, and HEPA stands for high efficiency particulate air. If he is not using a HEPA filter, if he's just using a standard filter of whatever other variety, those mold spores are going to go right into the vacuum, right through the filter, and they're actually going to be blown out into the rest of the house. And that is the opposite of what you want to happen. The next thing we're going to do is gross removal. And what that basically means, you know, we've got the room isolated, and now we're going to get the big stuff out. You know, if we've got carpet and pad that has a pile of mold on it, or if we've got the mushrooms growing or whatever, we've got to get that stuff out. If we've got sheetrock or 2x4s that have this big pile of mold on them, then we've got to get rid of those too. The next step, get rid of the big stuff. With the big stuff gone, now we're going to get rid of the little stuff in the damaged area. Little stuff again is going to involve maybe a HEPA vacuum to get the spores out and just clean that room up so that now the little stuff is gone. What we have left after that point is going to be molds that are clinging stubbornly onto, you know, maybe a stud that we perhaps don't want to replace. You know, whatever it is, if there is a sign of mold that is not physically removed with the gross removal, and it's not physically removed with the HEPA treatment, then the next step is to actually seal that. After that, we've got the restoration that occurs, and that's just handyman work. You know, restoring the 2x4s, restoring the sheetrock, restoring the carpet and pad. With the previous 5 steps done, any contractor can do that last restoration step. Another thing that's important that will help you to identify whether you're dealing with a pro or not is the contractor, as he is doing the remediation, you're going to want to see him fog the room. And what that basically means is you've got this mold colony down here. We're hitting it, let's say, with Clorox, just to pick something out of the air. You know, the Clorox will kill that mold, and so again, to try and survive, it's going to spit a whole bunch of mold spores into the room, and the moldicide is going to fog this room, and it's going to kill all of the mold spores that are in the air as well. That way you're much more likely to get a complete elimination of the mold that is in that room that day. So we've covered what remediation means. In the next segment, I'm just going to give you some background on what remediation is not. That's an important section because, you know, there are a lot of shysters out there, we'll put it that way. We'll be right back.